All right, welcome back to the Outdoor Adventures podcast. Today in the studio, I've got Josh Heckman and Kyler Gulaskey, and we're going to hear about their season this year. So,
thanks for having us, Sam.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You guys are looking fresh, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed. Kyler brought us all coffees this morning, so, mine's a hot cocoa, but...
Yeah, I've been rocking the mustache for a few days.
Yeah, feeling proud.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
Ladies love it.
Josh has got a full beard. I mean, it's a quality beard, too.
It never changes.
There's no gaps.
Never changes.
He's a true professional, So you guys had some success this year, spent some time hunting, and we're talking about Blacktail in Western Oregon. And so I think we don't have to dive right into how you got to where you ended up, but let's talk about, I guess, Josh, you first. Let us know kind of your history of blacktail hunting and, how this year was compared to your previous years.
I mean, absolutely. So I've been hunting for a couple years now, if that. So still very, very green to hunting. And I went with my dad in the past, probably 10 years old or so, but we just go drive roads. So nothing special. Didn't really learn anything. Didn't care to know anything about it. But then the last couple of years, Kyler, a couple other buddies, all of us kind of got into hunting. And that's kind of when I got a little more serious. And when I started to actually dig, because when I get into something, at that point, I'm either doing it or I'm not doing it. So I'm all in or I'm not going to do it at all. And so, first year, kind of slow. We drove a lot of roads, did some glassing, but it's a rifle blacktail. And honestly, Oregon rifle blacktail hunting is the mountains packed. The roads there's people everywhere. And the deer are just non-existent at that point. But then this year with Kyler, him and I, we got that Weyerhaeuser unit. And then after like a bunch of research, our tactics obviously cover a ton of ground. But then to kind of focus on those benches and those points, and that's kind of where we found a lot of our success is, kind of getting into the timber and finding sign. And that's kind of what happened to ours as well.
And so, the Western Oregon tag, it's an over-the-counter tag, and that's why it's a little bit busy out there.
Yeah.
What gun are you hunting with?
So right now, currently, I have a 6.5 Creedmoor. Love it for blacktail only, though. If I'm going to go rifle elk, which I'm not currently, we're archery, I'll definitely jump up to that 300 Win Mag, or I'm very interested in the 7 PRC. I know it's a new round out right now. I don't have a ton of info on it, but it looks pretty intriguing.
Yeah.
I know the 6.5 PRC is another great round.
Yeah, that's what I got, and I love that round. But also, Kyler's cousin Cameron got the 7 PRC.
Yeah.
So we had that out at the range, a couple Fridays ago.
Yeah.
And that was just a sweet cartridge.
After, hearing so many stories of how tough elk are, I want something with a little more power that I'm, if my shot's not perfect, it's still going to do some damage and make sure I take down that animal.
Yeah, I tracked cow elk with a 300 Win Mag hole through her for 5 miles up and down the nastiest country I've ever seen in the snow. It was my cousin's. And he put a good shot on her, and the exit hole was giant. And she still, we'd find these huge pools of blood, and she'd get up and keep going. They are tough.
They're really tough.
Insane.
So, good year, though. Let's talk numbers. How many times did you guys go out?
I think, for blacktail during rifle season, we were out, I would say at least 14 days, maybe.
I honestly, yeah. So I would, for me, you definitely went out more than I did. I was probably, upper 10, maybe close to 14. I think you did potentially a little more. But almost every time we were out together, though, definitely.
And these were day hunts. Typically, you'd get going at dark 30 and stay out.
Kind of. We had a couple lazy, cold mornings where we ended up staying in the truck. But honestly, it didn't seem to hurt our hunts at that point. We still came across animals. At that 7 a.m., between 7 and 10, animals were still showing up. They weren't in their beds yet. They weren't in the thick timber yet. So that was also kind of surprising.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of animals later in the day, too, like in their beds, the way that we were hunting.
Yeah.
Like sneaking through the timber.
So quantity of animals you were seeing on a daily basis, you think?
Man, there's a few days where we saw like 12 deer.
Yeah.
I remember.
Quite a bit of doe out there for sure. But, you know, we'd see on the good days 12 to 15 deer a day, which is solid.
Especially in Western Oregon, I feel like I mean, I've had days where you see one deer and you're like, I finally saw a deer today.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
No, we saw a ton of deer. We archery elk hunted, and we saw a lot of good bucks actually during archery elk season.
Yeah, that archery season was excellent. You got that stud on camera just right off the main road during archery season.
Yeah, right before dark, I was just driving around glassing, and he just hopped out in the road at like 40 yards and turned and looked at me, and he was a giant.
Was that one like the 4x6 or something, or was he like?
No, that was a different.
That was a different giant.
Another one in that same unit. So they're there.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
The one that you get for a while where he's out of your window.
Yeah.
I don't know how many videos he sent me on those couple days where he was still out there and just absolute monsters.
I saw a lot of deer this year. I mean, I didn't hunt on the west side. I still have a Willamette tag that I haven't really hunted much, but it seemed like I saw a lot of bucks. And I mean, I know there's guys that got success, but then I feel like a lot of people just didn't punch the tags for whatever reason. You know, obviously timing is a big part of it. But so let's talk about this timber sneaking strategy. Like, first of all, like, what made you guys want to try that?
Honestly, I guess failing at so many other things. It's like, what's our next option? What are we going to do next? What, you know, and what him and I are used to is going and diving into the national forests, you know, 5 rivers, and literally boots on the ground trying to find something. So that's kind of what we're actually used to, kind of, especially for elk. But just the glassing there there's so much area to glass, but there's no animals out. I mean, they're there, but we couldn't locate them. So that was like our next step in the process, is go dive into some drainages and kind of see what's around and see if we could find any sign at all.
And you guys were going super slow, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, to add to what Josh was saying, is I've never hunted clear cuts ever. I've always been over on the coast in the national forest, and it's like really thick and nasty, and that's just what I've elk hunted for archery. So when we went into this this private timber area where we had the permit, it was completely different, and I felt super uncomfortable because I've never really glassed. I didn't know where to find animals. Like, it was a whole new ball game.
Yeah, very overwhelming with how much land you have to glass. You know, each drainage you go to, you could see for miles. You're like, where do I even start at this point? So that was definitely a challenge for us this year. Just trying to locate animals and see which part of that unit that they're using.
And deer eyes, you know, I mean, we talk about this in my family quite a bit. It's like we grow up learning how to find deer and spot deer and looking for little Mickey Mouse faces or ear flicks or a head turn or an antler gleaning off of the sun or whatever. You know, you're looking for these little things because sometimes, especially blacktail, I mean, they can be there and they are not moving.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings up a excellent point. Like, just to even see that, I mean, if you're not using a tripod or have some of those new SIGs, you don't really stand a chance out there, you know, depending on your distance that you're glassing. Just the stability you get from those it's absolutely a game changer.
Yeah.
Well, and like Lyndon and I, during elk season, I took him in there for a couple days, and we pulled into this spot, parked the pickup. We were going to go into this walk-in area, a bunch of, like, it's thicker timber. And we were sitting talking at the truck for like 5 or 10 minutes, and this stud blacktail, like probably 75 yards from us, stands up out of the clear cut and just trotted off. And he was a giant, like past his ears, tall, wide, thick. And he was there for 10 minutes while we were talking.
Never saw him.
We never saw him.
He never moved.
If he wouldn't have got up, we would have never seen him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And, you know, we all have good spots, and I guarantee you we all miss deer too.
Yeah.
You know,
all the time.
I have a friend, Joe, who hunts from tree stands, you know, and he used to be a rifle hunter, but now he's archery hunter only. But he'll hunt blacktail and tree stands, and he'll be on these edges of, you know, regrowth or like clear cuts or whatever.
Yeah.
And he'll watch other hunters push deer, and he'll watch the deer out in front of him, and they never see the deer, and he just watches the whole thing unfold, you know.
Yeah, I think that's something that was huge for us, and we can like get into this more obviously, but the wind was like, that's huge.
So important.
Yeah.
So 14 days roughly of hunting. How was the morale as you guys were getting in there? Were you starting to be like, are we going to get this? Like, I don't remember when you found success obviously probably towards the end of that, but like, were you feeling pretty confident that like, okay, it's just the right day is going to come? Were you starting to lose hope a little bit?
I mean, so when we were out pre-scouting before elk season, we saw deer everywhere. So I think heading into Blacktail rifle, the confidence was high. We had seen them everywhere. We knew we were going to get, this year when they bumped the season back. So we kind of got a solid chunk of the rut as well. We knew they were going to be out there cruising. So the Blacktail confidence was just there. It's just a matter of when and, am I going to find a monster out here that we have seen in the past?
Scouting was huge for us. I think the first time we went up there, we drove 150 miles.
Wow.
And just like covered ground, looked for animals. And like that was not a waste of time at all because we knew we found animals, we found out where they're hanging out, and that gave us a lot of confidence to go back in. Even if we weren't seeing game there, we knew that they were there, and it was a matter of time.
Well, and now that you've had success, all the articles I've ever read about Blacktail is if people think, okay, I got the big buck last year, there's not going to be another one, but another big buck will come in and take that territory in that same area where you got yours, So there's a high likelihood that you can go back in there and have a reasonable chance at running into another big buck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we saw so many big bucks.
Yeah, even after that season ended, Kyler's in there with his dad doing rifle elk, and he's sending me videos left and right of how many monster bucks he's seeing just out roaming. So
yeah, I think my dad and I saw in one day during second elk, or the Cascade elk, sorry. I think we saw 5 or 6 bucks, and the smallest one was a 3x3.
Yeah.
And everything else was like 6x4, 4x4, just like giant bucks. And that's like during rut or like late rut, and they were out cruising. So
the cool thing about that too is that where he's seeing those ones was some territory that we've never been. Like that was his first time there. So it's actually super exciting knowing that we can work more west and that there's still big animals out there for sure.
And it sounds like a lot of them are still alive for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, at that point, it was what you had late season archery would have been the only option.
Yeah, which is, we're going to hunt that this year for
That's the plan this year for sure.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do rifle, you're going to go late season archery?
No, I think I'm going to take my wife out for rifle blacktail.
Okay.
And then, then I think we're going to archery.
And Edgar.
Yeah, and Edgar.
Edgar's gonna be
we
part
got
of
a
that
couple
too.
people we're going to take out during rifles. So.
Well, when you come around with this big buck and these stories, guys want to jump on the bandwagon,
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh just killed a giant.
Right place, right time.
That's
so hunting.
Do we want to get into Josh's buck and kind of that story and how it kind of transpired? Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, I can start us off with that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So Josh and I had been out and we had hunted a few days, and we are always on our phones fucking around trying to like e-scout and look for new areas. And I found this spot out in the burn that didn't get touched by the fire, and it's like probably 30-year-old regrowth. So it's like open underneath, fairly easy to walk through. And then there's like clear cuts, and it's kind of tucked away in this area where not a lot of guys are hunting. And I'm like, dude, I think there's a big buck in this drainage. Let's go check it out tomorrow. And so we drive in there, and we park the pickup, and it took us like 45 minutes to get off the road down into the drainage being quiet.
Yeah.
It took so long.
And we
to go
probably
like
traveled, I don't know,
100
maybe
yards.
Yeah, a little over 100 yards max. So
Was it just really steep or?
super steep? I mean,
rocky because it had burned, so all the roots were gone, and the soil's kind of gives away.
and it
pretty
hadn't
easy.
rained for a while either. So the ground was definitely crunchy,
Yeah.
So we had to go super slow.
Yeah. So we're working our way through there, and Josh is so much better than me at going slow and checking the timber with his binos, and I learned a lot from him this year with that actually. But we just crept along this drainage. Did we jump a doe or something early? Or
So from what I remember, we walked down. We get kind of towards the bottom or a little bench, and we're sitting there. I know we were super hot because it was kind of cold that day. Had puffies on. It was still kind of cold out. But as soon as you start hiking, you warm up real fast. So we stop, take our jackets off, throw them in our bags, and then we hear something just to the east of us. And you and I look at each other, you're like, I think that's a bear.
Oh,
and at
yeah.
that point, we're like, let's go kill that bear.
Yeah, there's like a bear tearing up a stump, I think. It was loud, like loud pounding.
Yeah. I don't think it was a deer or anything like that. And I started thinking, maybe that even bumped that buck up out of there. He's like, all right, I'm leaving. And so
this bear's not happy, and I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang out with him.
I'm not going to be his dinner, so I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, so we spent all that time going down into the drainage where we could walk quiet. And then literally 100 yards up from us, we started hearing that bear. And so we started working our way back towards that bear, back towards the ridge, super slow. He went away. He must have winded us. And then we just started creeping down that ridge super slow.
Yep, and there was tracks through there for sure. I mean, we were onto something. Had hope that we were heading in the right direction. That was our first time in that area. But we just go every couple steps, and I'd pull up my binos and just keep glassing, because with that reprod, you can really only see so much. So each step, you pretty much have a full new area to look at.
A new angle too.
Yeah, new
trees.
angle, new area, and we just kept creeping down. And then I just remember pulling my binos up that one time, and I just see this buck just come across my field of view. I was like, Kyler, there is a monster buck right there. And he kind of went out of my sight. And I remember I kept like whispering to him, like, hey, do you see it? And then next thing I know, I look over, and he's got his gun up. He's like, I see it. I was like, dude, I don't have a shot. He's like, I do. I'm like, shoot.
Yeah, so I had a window that was probably like 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet, and I could see his neck to his head, and I'm like, it was only like 100 yards maybe.
If that.
Yeah,
it was
between a heavy cover on both sides, basically.
Yeah, it was pretty open. Like, it was a clear shot, and I had a neck basically to his head, and I'm like, dude, I'm going to smoke this thing. So I pull up my rifle, and I think I rushed the shot looking back on it because I probably had some buck fever, I'm guessing.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
I torched one off, and he doesn't move. I'm like, damn. I'm like, what the fuck? So I rack another shell in. He takes a couple steps, or maybe just one step, because then it was just like his heart and lungs and vitals were showing in that space. And I shot again, and it must have been close because he kind of trotted off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I don't know I was like pretty defeated because I didn't hit him. And so we sat there for a second. I think we gave it 5 minutes or something.
Just in case.
Yeah.
And then kind of started, at that point, I pull up my phone. I'm like, all right, I'm marking a spot on Onyx where I think he's at, so that we
Because
don't
you're like,
get
we're
up
not
there.
going to see this buck again.
Yeah.
Or
Get lost.
We thought
Or,
for sure he was gone.
just to make sure that we walk to the right area, because it's so easy to get like turned around out there and either walk past where you thought you saw him or not even make it far enough. So, I knew we had time, mark a spot real quick, and then we kind of start walking down, hopefully looking for some sort of blood or anything. But then, so we get to that spot, didn't really see anything, but you can kind of still see the tracks kind of where he trotted through.
Yeah, he was eating mushrooms. So there's like a main deer trail, and they were eating all the mushrooms on this trail. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so then we kind of, I guess it kind of drops down again to like another little bench, and him and I are like, I don't know, 20 yards apart, if that. And I'm slightly just to his east, so we're kind of the same distance. Come up over the ridge, and the next thing I see is like this thing's literally just staring at me. And I remember, he's staring at me, and I start whispering to Kyler. I'm like, Kyler, he's right there. And
that whole time, I had seen him at the same time, but all I could see was his ass behind this tree.
Yeah.
And Josh is like, he's right there. I'm like, I know. I'm like, I don't have a shot. He's like, he's staring right at me. I'm like, shoot him. He's like, he's literally staring right at me.
Yeah, and so a couple seconds go by. He's like looking, and then he turns his head away, and like at that point, I just pull up my rifle real quick and just blast off a shot. I mean, he was quartering away, so it wasn't the best shot, but it was up into the vitals, and it got the job done.
50 yards, 75 yards,
40?
Yeah,
40,
dude, very
30
very
maybe?
close, very close.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you come up over that ridge, he's 30,
I wonder what he was
40
thinking.
yards.
Like, I don't know if he just was like, I don't want to leave this area, or if it was just ruddy, or like why he gave you guys that.
I think, to be honest, he was a little bit ruddy, but also I don't think that a lot of people have been in that area, and I don't know if he'd seen other hunters or anything, because he didn't seem worried about us at all.
No, like, yeah, he just stood there and then turned his head back away, and that's when I got a shot. So at that point, again, talk about hunting, right place, right time, kind of get lucky right there, because Kyler could have killed that thing right then and there, but then I don't know. I guess things happen out in the woods that you never expect.
Well, yeah, or you get those first 2 shots and you never see him again. I mean, that's more typically the way it goes. I mean,
Dude, I was crushed.
Yeah, typically when you get some shots, you're not going to see that
Going
animal
back
again.
to Kyler's rifle, though, I mean, you've been to the range multiple times with that same gun, haven't touched it, and it is way off.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like, maybe a little bit of buck fever, but at the same time.
Yeah, but is that the one we were trying to shoot on Friday and then we had it and then it went all out of whack? Yeah.
I've had trouble
So
with it.
something,
This last
Something's
year.
off, either optic, I don't know what it is, but like he'll get it dialed in and then like he tries to put the 0 and then we wouldn't even hit paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something going on with it.
Yeah, we got to figure that out.
And we can touch more on that when we talk about my buck too. But so Josh shot that buck. He definitely smoked him. I'm like, dude, you fucking smoked him. He takes off and he's running down the drainage downhill. And you could tell he was hurt. And we gave him a few minutes and we started following the blood trail. And
honestly, there wasn't a ton. Like,
no, not
it was
a lot
there.
of blood.
There was probably speckles every 15 yards or so.
Yeah. And we just went slow and it like there was 2 deer trails that split and I went high and Josh went low, and like I would say 100 yards from where he shot him, Josh found him laying there.
Was that frothy blood? Was it a long shot, you think?
I think it had to be lung because I didn't hit heart for sure. So it was at least one lung, like because of the angle. It's also a little gut too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It was just quartered away, and like honestly it was a good shot. It was just a little bit back, but it was quartered away, so it went through that lung on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, but you take the shot you're presented with sometimes.
Yeah,
when you
at
knew
that
it was
point,
a-
I'm just trying to put something up in his chest cavity that I know is going to do damage. I mean, it was probably a couple inches behind his like armpit, kind of. So, and him quartered away made it a little deeper, unfortunately.
So what are you thinking as you're coming up to that buck? Like, I mean, when you know you found him, I mean,
don't
that
even
feeling
know.
is a
shock,
feeling that's
shock at that point. Like, holy cow, we just did it finally. Like everything worked out, all the work we put in, it finally happened. So that was awesome, especially coming off my previous buck, which we don't really need to talk too much about. Not a super proud moment, but
Did you know how big this one was as you're coming up to it? Like, were you looking on the ground?
no.
Going, this thing is
No
I don't
idea.
think Josh knew.
no,
Because I
don't-
was like, dude, that is a giant, like big, huge body. I've never seen a blacktail that big. I'm like, that thing looks like a mule deer. And it was so cool. Like
yeah, the rack, I knew the rack was big, great, but like with my inexperience of seeing that many animals out there and not, I haven't killed a ton of animals, so I'm like, it's just finally I got a normal size buck at this point, but it was so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. Like after like me settling down, the shock, everything, I'm like, oh my God, this is the best possible situation that could have happened.
That's cool.
at this
And
time.
when you're in that moment and you finally have that accomplishment,
Yeah.
like the animal you were going for is now on the ground, and now you're thinking, okay, I got to do the work, but you're still just like, okay, I did it.
Yeah,
I got it done.
Yeah, it was.
that was the happiest moment of my season for sure.
Same.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're out with your buddy, your hunting partner, and you put in all that time and all that energy, and like you have all those, you don't get a ton of opportunities. So when it all comes together, it's like, damn, like that is so cool.
Yeah. And, and you you have those moments of gratitude and appreciation for the animal and
Yep,
like just
absolutely.
the experience. And I think we all think, okay, we could replicate this a bunch of times over, but who knows? You may never have that exact circumstance will probably never happen again, just the way it went down. I mean, you'll have other experiences and adventures, but that way that happened will probably never happen again.
No. I agree with that. And I still try to understand, you look at the people who get it done every single year, like what separates them from the ones that are, every couple years, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just, it's hard to kind of comprehend, are those guys putting in that much more time or do they have that much more knowledge of what they're doing out there? That's what I want to know. That's where I'm like still stuck on what else do I need to figure out? How do I be better every single time?
And I think it's a combination of we scouted a lot, but we also put in a lot of miles, and we went out even when we weren't finding success. So it's a combination of all those things, and then you sprinkle in a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what it takes.
Tenacity to keep getting after it. And, maybe you invest in moccasins so you can stock quieter. Equipment matters too. Like you were alluding to with the binos, like having those self-stabilizing binos makes a difference. All those little tools help.
Yeah. And in that timber too, like if if you're someone that wants to go in there and timber sneak, 10 power is probably the max that you're going to want for something like that. Even an 8 would be just amazing. Because once you get up into that higher power, everything, it gets so much tighter in there, and you can't really see as much.
I think something I learned this year too is like, if I do that rifle hunt again, I'm probably going to use an open-sided 30-30 or 30-06.
Yeah.
Just because the shots are going to be no more than 75 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe 150 at the most, which you can still make that shot easily.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
So let's fast forward to your buck, Kyler. So you Josh's buck, get her done.
That was October 23rd, I believe.
I think so. Let me
24th.
So how many more days this season did we have?
So it went till November 10th.
Oh, so you still had probably a few more hunts before you got to your buck then.
23rd.
Yeah. So Josh killed his on the 23rd. I think we went out a couple more times. We did some big long hikes.
Yep.
I remember we did like a 14-miler one day. It was a long day, and we saw deer bedded, but we didn't see any other bucks, I don't think. And then my wife wanted to come out with us, and we got in the truck one morning, and we had a plan on we were going to go back to where Josh killed his buck in that same general area. And we're driving. We got up there early. It was just getting light, and there's 2 pickups in front of us. And they were going so slow, which is fine, but we were in a hurry to get to where we wanted to hunt, in the timber. And the pickups in front of us let us go by. And we're driving, and I'm like, Josh, I'm just going to bust through this, dude, and get to where we need to go. He's like, yeah, sounds good. So we're driving, and where we've seen multiple deer, I think we've seen
tons of sign, multiple deer through there.
Tons of deer, lots of sign in this area on the south side. And it was just light, and Josh is like, he's like, buck right there. And I'm like, okay. So I throw it in park, get my rifle out. It's not sighted in, which I didn't know at the time. And I get off the road, and I'm just free-handing the shot. And it didn't look that far to me. It looked like maybe 150 yards. I'm like, I'm just going to hold it right on with the 6.5, So I shoot. He's at the end of this clear cut, right on the timberline, looking over his shoulder, broadside. So I shoot, nothing. I'm like, no. Rack another one, boom, shoot. I'm like, son of a gun. So I get a rest for the third shot. Nothing. I'm like, geez Louise. Like, I'm embarrassed at this point. There's a pickup behind us watching.
This buck's still standing there staring at us like, what is going on over there?
You had an audience at that point.
It was not good. I shoot again and miss. And Josh gives me his rifle. And during that time, I had like a couple seconds to kind of like reevaluate the situation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that guy's like pretty far down there. So I put it like, I think a foot over his back, and I shot him, and he dropped.
Dumped
And this is with Josh's gun?
Yep. So we drove down there, and he was laying there.
Did you guys ever range where he was at?
No.
It looked like, so after the fact, yes. But
that's what I mean.
During like, hey, we're not going to get this opportunity. This guy's about to take off. Like, just get out.
Right.
Should have ranged him looking back.
How far was the shot?
It was 300.
Yeah.
And you thought it was 150?
Yeah. So.
Holding straight on at 300.
Yeah. It was embarrassing, and then that's a learning experience for me, because honestly, I could have just pulled out my rangefinder
real quick,
dialed to, and got it done.
Yeah, true.
But I didn't know if he's going to take off either.
Yeah, and I don't know the ballistics on the 6.5, how much bullet drop you get, but I think it's pretty decent at that.
It's about a foot at 300.
I think,
so you were spot on with that last
one
shot.
click, pretty much.
Yeah.
So just holding, high shoulder would have been probably fine, honestly, on that.
Yeah.
Well, and Kyler, just regressing a little bit, he got this 300 Win Mag, and we were at the range a couple Fridays ago, and I thought I was shooting a 6.5 that he was having trouble. So I didn't because he's like, you shoot it and you see what's going on. So I get down there on the rest and it's his 300 win. And I'm expecting a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Oh boy.
So I go and I wham. And I'm just like, man, that 6.5 kicks like a mule. And he's like, that's my 300 Win Mag. You know?
Sam's like, rattled my teeth.
Yeah, because I'm holding it like
Good thing you're holding it tight.
But I'm holding it like a 6.5. Yeah. I still wasn't holding it like a 300 Win Mag. You know, like, I don't know.
Anytime I grab 300, there's a little more respect.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're holding that thing a little tighter. Yeah.
But that was awesome because Whit was there. And so she got to be there, see it. She helped us gut it, kind of took some video, and
and it's cool. A good buck. I mean, you brought it in here.
It's super cool.
Yeah, it's a cool buck. He broke off half of his side, probably fighting with another buck, or who knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a cool buck.
Yeah,
it's crazy at that distance too. It's tall. It's really tall.
It was really tall. Yeah.
And as soon as I glassed it up, I'm like, oh, dude, big buck right over there. Like I was like probably close, thinking same size as mine. But yeah, I think it's taller than mine, honestly.
It was taller for sure, but it was probably only 2.5 years old, I would guess. But yeah.
But I mean, honestly, a blacktail buck is a trophy in my mind. Yeah. I mean, people call them the ghosts of the West for a reason. I mean, you just don't have that many blacktail opportunities. No. I brought in my 3x5 because I was having Josh look at it before we got started. Like, how big is your paddle compared to this? And his is bigger, is what I found out. But when I shot that 3x5, I was telling you guys this giant fork revert came out, after I shot him. Well, another time I shot a fork and horn buck and another big buck. So it's like, you don't know when those opportunities are going to come. And to me, harvested animal on the ground, meat in the freezer, especially with blacktail hunting, I'm not the guy that wants to shoot that little milk breath with little teeny nubs sticking out. Yeah. But, I like my meat to be dark red all the way through. But at the same time, it's like, you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get during the blacktail season.
And I don't have enough experience, and I can't speak for you guys, but I don't have enough experience to say, hey, I'm going to hold out for an absolute giant buck. I just want the meat in my freezer. Yeah. I don't want to shoot a spike or a small fork, really.
Yeah.
I want to shoot a mature deer because you get more meat. Yep. And it's more of a challenge, but
and nothing against anyone that shoots those smaller deer, but like, they're just, when you see one that's like, you can tell it was like last year's baby kind of thing, and they're just kind of doughy-eyed and I mean, it's like obvious.
You want to give them a chance to grow and get bigger, and
I'm not gonna lie, I've done it.
That was your first buck, though.
The first buck, last day of the season. Never do it again. Like after doing that, got the experience, got my first buck, got it out of the way. But I'm not going to say that I'm going to hold out for a giant either. I'll take probably a fork, maybe not on the first day or second, but if that time comes where I know I only have a couple days left, I will take that buck because I do want to fill my freezer.
Yeah, and that meat, I mean, you can't beat that meat.
No.
It's the best meat.
You can't beat that meat.
Yeah, it's the very best. And Kyler and I have been going to the gym, and I've been cooking up venison and just having a baggie here in the fridge. Yep. And then I'm getting my protein, throughout the day, just chowing down on that.
Absolutely.
So. And those animals are eating such a big variety of plants, and they're getting all those minerals, and that meat is high quality, nutrient dense, not a lot of fat. It's a really good protein source.
It is. Well,
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
I would like to talk a little bit about some of the things Josh and I look for and what we learned this year and where we saw deer.
Exactly where I was going. I was going to say, okay, what did you guys learn from this season that you'll add on to next year? But
so specifically blacktail, right? Still. Yeah. You want to start off on that one, and I'll kind of come in?
So like I was saying earlier, we drove all those roads, found where the animals were. We spent a lot of time glassing. I think we glassed up some deer early during preseason when we were scouting. But then once the season hit, we didn't really have any success glassing up animals. Yeah. And so we started to reevaluate and be like, hey, what do we need to do to find these things, And we started looking for benches on the map that were close to these burned up areas or close to cuts where we could sneak through the timber, very edgy, transition areas where it was thick brush, clear cut, or reprod timber, big timber. And we did a lot of hikes through those areas that we mapped out on the map. And every time we got into those areas, if the wind was right, we would jump deer out of their beds.
Every time. And what's crazy too, like what I kind of noticed is like trying to find distance from where you know everyone else is going to be hunting as well. So those main roads, you know, once you kind of get in there, there's only 4 gates that you get to go in on with that permit. Mm-hmm. And so trying to find kind of the deepest area away from where you know everyone else is going to be hunting, because once you drive it for a little while, you know what the main roads are and where everyone's going to be coming in from. But yeah, as far as edges, I mean, the more the better. If you got your reprod, clear cut, the more edges you can find, they're hanging out in there for sure.
Do you think the deer too, as the hunters started showing up, their behaviors changed and they just they were getting further from the road because of all the pressure they were getting?
Yes.
And what always surprises me is you can go one bench over the road where you can't see it quite from the road and the deer are there. Like, you don't have to be that far off the path that everyone else is on, and oftentimes they're there. And I don't know if that's what you experienced or if you had to go deeper than that, but I've always been shocked how oh, here's all the deer sign, here's the deer.
Yep.
And it's like they can almost see the road from their vantage point, but you'll never see them from the road, you know?
Yeah, I think that's true, because they know where they see pickups parked.
They feel the pressure for sure.
Yeah, and they find those little spots on clear cuts where they're tucked away, where you can't see it from the main road, and they're laying there. You know what I mean? They know where people are
Nothing's going to
glassing.
mess with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that time of the year as well, a lot of those blacktail kind of go, especially the mature ones, go nocturnal. And they, unless you're going into that timber, you're not going to really see them during the day at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them are already back in the timber at light. Mm-hmm. Like, as soon as first light hits, they're in the timber and they're working their way through the timber back to their beds.
They fed all night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's what we did. We just kept marking these spots where we're like, hey, clear cut here. There's a big bench here. It drops off into a drainage. There's no roads close by. It's a mile from the road. Like, those are the areas we kept checking and kept going into, and that's where we saw the animals.
And also, I think part of, we did it a couple times, but just having a plan, like, each day, we're going to hit this spot first. We're going to walk in there, check it out. If there's no sign, we already know where we're going next. It's not, okay, what now?
Right.
Not wasting any time.
I like, too, that it's it feels more authentic, too. Not that I'll take a deer off of the road on the way to my spot. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, a buck's a buck.
Yeah,
but when you're getting out there and you're getting away from everyone else, it feels like more of a hunt for me.
Yeah.
It's more rewarding, I think.
Yeah. And nothing against the other way, too. It's good, too. But there's something about, that experience and getting there until you're ready to pack out. And then you're like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
It's worth it, though. I agree with you, though. Like, finding those spots that you e-scouted, it gives you that feeling of accomplishment. You're like, all right, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm not. Because then you think about blacktail. Just so challenging to hunt. You
guys have gotten pretty proficient with the e-scouting thing too, like playing with Onyx and just looking at topography and I've just been impressed with how you guys can really dial in. We're planning this Idaho hunt in November, and you guys were already pulling up the unit and looking at all these different angles and benches and where we want to go. And
I think Josh is better at that. He taught me a lot about it.
I like to think I know what I'm doing, but then you get out into the woods and sometimes it changes your mind. You're like, all right, well, I don't actually know anything.
Right.
But,
and sometimes you'll see something on the map where you're like, this looks amazing, and you go in and check it out and you're like, this is not even
This is
huntable.
a shithole.
Yeah.
Where it's just nothing. Yeah.
And then sometimes there's hidden benches too, or spots where you're like, this isn't on the map.
Yeah, your topo, it doesn't even look like a bench, but it is actually perfect. And then you see a bed and you see droppings on the ground. You're like, okay, this is actually a legit spot. And then I think also just kind of marking stuff while you're out there. If you see deer in a specific spot, mark that spot, and then after your day's over, go back and kind of recap maybe why they were there, where they're headed, and try to figure out more of how these animals are using the area.
Sounds like you guys are paying a lot of attention to what's in the surroundings too. I think a lot of us just are like, oh, we saw deer there, we'll go back there, hopefully we'll see deer again. But you're more like studying it, if you will. Okay, this is the topography. These are the vegetation we saw. This is the drainage. You're looking at all those things.
Oh, it's so true. Like, we saw so many deer on the south side of this unit where the sun is hitting all day. And a huge burn went through there a couple of years back, the Holiday Farm Fire. And there's an abundance of feed in that area. And so we're like, hey, like, the south side is loaded with feed, and that's where we saw most of the animals.
Mm-hmm.
So paying attention to feed, I think, is super important too.
Yeah.
Then you look at like our elk season, though. I feel like we saw them on the south side occasionally, but we got into quite a bit on the north side.
Right.
And I would imagine just because the temperatures and they're trying to get out of the sun and down into these deep, cooler drainages. But definitely for Blacktail, that south side was packed.
Yeah.
Food, water, shelter. That's what it's all about. And you look at, deer, that shelter component, a lot of that is predators, and we're the predators, right? So they're finding that area where nobody's going to see them, or where they think nobody's going to see them.
Yeah. Honestly, that's something we've talked a little bit about. We only saw bear sign in like 2 different areas in that 160,000 acres. And we didn't cover it all, but the areas we did cover, there's only one drainage where we saw bear sign. And I don't think I saw one bobcat and one set of cougar tracks the whole season. And that's from August until November.
So you're not thinking there's a lot of natural predators out there?
No.
You're going to have some coyotes, you're going to have some cougar, you're going to have some bear, but
there's not many, I don't think, especially with the numbers of animals we saw for deer and elk.
Which is good. That's a lot better for the deer than when they're getting hammered by everybody.
And I don't know why that is. I don't know if maybe those timber companies hire someone to take care of those bears because they debark all the trees in the spring.
Predator control,
Yeah.
That makes sense. That would make sense to me that they would do that, but that'd be interesting to find that out. Because you look at some of these other areas that have just been decimated, even coyotes. There's some properties out here just in North Albany across the river that used to have a lot of deer, and now like the people living there, like, we never see deer anymore. And I think the coyotes are just whacking them down.
Well, you've had coyotes at your place in South Salem.
Oh yeah,
like they ate how many of your lambs?
Four lambs last year.
Yeah.
And the elk herd we have on the refuge can't get any bigger because the coyotes get the calves every year.
It's been 10 head for like
10 to 13
for years,
forever. And like whenever the calves are there, you'll see them, and then the calves are gone.
And that's on a refuge where no one hunts.
Yeah, no one hunts it. So I saw 4 elk yesterday morning on the way in for the first time in a while. And they're kind of an elusive herd. They have a lot of bulls. They don't have really good, for whatever reason, it seems like the bulls are the only ones that survive. And so we're down to like 5 or 6 cows, which is getting pretty small for that herd to keep staying alive. So.
Right.
And but it's a wildlife refuge, so the coyotes know that they're safe there.
Yeah, exactly.
So
guess that says something about predator hunting.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, to get out there, and whenever, like, if you're tagged out and you're done and, you want to go back and take out some coyotes that are going after your gut bag or whatever, do your part.
Hunting season doesn't have to end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, do we have anything else we want to cover?
How long have we been talking?
About 45 minutes.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about elk, unless you just want to leave it on this.
No, I think it's cool. We've got a little more time if you guys want to talk about elk. I know, Kyler, you've had a fair amount of success on the coast, elk hunting in some of the nastiest country imaginable.
Yeah, good old Alcy. Yeah.
These guys that have the Oregon First podcast, they always talk about swimming in the coastal woods.
Yeah.
Because it's wet.
And
it's thick.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten stinging nettle or got into the Devil's Club or the blackberries. It's brutal. Like hunting the coast, I've taken people and we do one day and I'm like, how do you want to go back out? And they're like, dude, I'm never going to the coast again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do it. It's just steep and deep.
Yeah. I did one season with you, and it was fun. We found a lot of mushrooms, and we saw some elk and stuff, and we saw some really cool country, but didn't get the opportunity that year. And I think that's part of the thing. Like, I think you have a pretty good feel of the elk are either going to be here or there.
Yeah.
But those two spots are maybe 20-mile radius from each other. So it's, I mean, you have a pretty good idea of some of their patterns.
Yeah, the elk on the coast in the national forest are really challenging to hunt because there's no clear cuts. You can't do any glassing. There's some thinnings that they do every year on contract with the Forest Service, but they don't really log or manage the forest, and it's just thick, and there's feed everywhere. There's water in every single drainage, so those elk can go wherever they want. And there's big herds, and there's a lot of elk, but you can be 20 yards from them and not see them and not get an opportunity.
Yeah, whereas on the east side, it's always like, okay, you find water and, you're going to find elk, because it's hotter and there's not that many watering holes, and,
Mm-hmm.
but over here, there's water everywhere. So
yeah. It's challenging, too, because your calls, like archery elk, you're doing a lot of calling, and that's how you locate elk, and your calls don't really go that far in that dense forest. I would say like 150 yards.
So are you calling a lot then? I mean, have you changed your tactics to where you're calling quite a bit?
Yeah, I think like later in the year, I will definitely find areas where I can bugle, and I'll bugle every 150 yards. Mm-hmm. And I like the last bull I killed, we got on him and we followed him behind him for 3 miles, and I was bugling like every 150 yards. And then the last time I ripped one off, he sounded back around this corner of this old cat road at 100 yards, and I had called 100 yards previously and there was nothing, no sound, so that was interesting to me, is how close I had to be to get him to respond.
Yeah.
Do you think at that point that maybe he didn't hear you because of how thick the timber was, or that maybe he just wasn't, he wasn't ready for that fight? Like he just wanted to take his cows and continue to move on?
Yeah, I think that maybe he did hear me, and they were working up that road to wherever they wanted to go. And as soon as I got in his bubble, and
then he was like, okay, I got to deal with this guy now.
Yeah, because he was fired up. He ripped one off, and then he was grunting and he was glunking. And the only reason I knew right where he was is I looked up about 150 feet into this alder, and I could see the top of this alder where he was rubbing, just shaking the whole tree. I'm like, holy smokes. And he was fired up, ready to go. And that was a cool experience.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and this year, how many days did you guys hunt? I don't feel like you hunted it as much as you did last year. Yeah, on elk.
Maybe 7 or 8 days, 10 days.
Yeah, maybe a little more. I probably close to 10 again, roughly.
Okay, so you did put some time in.
Yeah,
not as much as we would have liked.
You were getting married and stuff like that, weren't you?
Yeah,
that's kind of a little that changes things a little bit.
Luckily, she's great and understood.
Yeah,
the one thing I told her is just not during elk season, and she did that. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah,
so it all worked out.
Yeah, that is something we should mention. Is Whitney lets me hunt. She knows I love to do that, and so. Hunting season, I'm just she's go do whatever, and I'm super grateful for that.
See you when you get back.
Absolutely.
That is nice. Yeah.
You always feel, you coming home unsuccessful, you're spending so much time away, and you come home with nothing consistently. So that part's disappointing. It really kind of brings you down, but both of them are always there to support us, and they know that this is our passion. So super thankful for that.
Yeah. Did you guys encounter elk this year? Did you get into any?
Yeah, we opening weekend we did not, but I want to say the next week we went out, we went into this walk-in area, and we got into this little drainage that Josh found on the map, and we did some calling from a landing. And probably 40-year-old timber that was pretty thick underneath. We had a bull. We heard him making noise in the brush, and we were on this landing, and we fucked it up just because we weren't paying attention. And we heard him down there, and we both, for some reason, walked up to the edge of the landing, and we peeked over, and he was walking up the drainage at us, and I'm pretty sure he saw us. He was 70 yards.
Yeah.
Hindsight, we should have probably backed up. I should have been raking and kept calling, and Josh should have got set up for him to come up and gave him another 5, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. I know you always replay those moments forever when they don't go the way you want them to.
And that's for me. So, I mean, elk hunting, I rely on Kyler for tactics, for anything.
Can you call, Josh? Have you started practicing?
Yeah,
my cow calls are decent. My bugles, nah, I need to practice more for sure.
It's hard. It's really hard.
But at the same time, if you go out there and you kind of listen to some of these bulls that are bugling to you, they're not great.
Yeah. Well, even that little hoochie mama call, I mean, we had one day when we were doing it this year where the elk weren't responding to anything. There was a fire, and it was kind of like they just weren't very vocal, even though they had been the day before. And then my cousin was just goofing around with that little hoochie mama call, and we never got any responses back. But then we walked up on 2 spike bulls that were like 70 yards from him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was.
I think that's something I really realized was different in this Cascade area where we were hunting. Is like those bulls are pressured pretty hard, I think.
Oh,
and I only got a bull to bugle 3 times. 1 bull this year.
I didn't hear a single bugle at all this year.
Yeah, and so this year when we hunt in there, I think we're going to find success by locating, staying close to the herd and being quiet and kind of trying to get ahead of them and letting them work into us without them knowing we're there.
Being a little more subtle about it.
Kind of those blacktail tactics, a little more timber sneaking.
100%. Because on the coast, they're not pressured as hard and there's more elk. So they're more responsive. And like you can get bugles back, you can get the cows talking. But over on this side, we could not get anything to talk. Not even the cows. It was pretty interesting.
We did bump a herd as well from calling. Which maybe they winded us or something. You never know at that time. But yeah, no bugles, no nothing. We honestly, on that side too, we didn't see a ton of sign.
No. We saw
really anywhere. So I'm kind of
raghorns.
Curious what the bull to cow ratio is there versus the coast.
But also preseason, you guys found some elk, didn't you?
We were just driving a road, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but we're driving, and all of a sudden I just threw it in park, and there was 6 giant bulls all bachelored up, and they were all 6x6s, huge
monster
stud bulls.
I remember, I don't know where, you guys must have come in here and you guys were both all fired up about that. I just remember that.
Dude, I've never seen
They gave us a ton of confidence heading into the season. We're going to find them for sure.
6 giants.
We didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't find them at all.
Yeah. It was cool.
Yeah.
But that gave us a lot of, like Josh said, that gave us a lot of confidence because we're like, oh, they were right here. And then as they get pressured, they're probably going to go into these areas where people aren't,
So you didn't hunt the coast this year. You stayed on that
Not once.
Permit area.
Yeah, Josh is anti-coast now. So.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-coast.
You don't like walking. I don't know what degree that is, but it's pretty steep. You go straight.
Terrible.
I don't mind the way in. It's the way out that I
think we're gonna
especially if you have a bull down and you're walking out
Yeah.
just straight up that incline.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do it different this year on the coast where we plan, we park a pickup at the top of a drainage and one at the bottom, and then just plan on spending 8 hours working our way through that whole entire drainage.
Yeah. I remember that time I went with you and Tyler, and we left our rig way up the top, and then we walked along the road for 4 miles before we went in. And I'm like, guys, we could have drove right here. I just kept saying that in my head. But they wanted to do it, though they had a plan. And then we get deep in there at the bottom of this thing, and then we're looking at a straight up 90-degree cliff.
Oh, yeah.
And they're on their Onyx, and they're like, all we got to do is pop over here, and we'll get right there. I'm like, guys, if you don't have rock climbing equipment, we are not going up that wall, So we got to go back the way we came in.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge with the coast is you can't glass. There's no roads. It's national forest. Everything goes to the bottom, and then it's you have to go right back out the way you came a lot of the time. So that's half your day is gone checking those drainages.
It's cool. I enjoyed some of those hunts. You definitely get a workout, and you being in that dense timber where it's dark with it's so dense, and you're seeing all this elk sign. It is fun. It's just it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of running and gunning, kind of.
Yeah, and you're you're getting soaked on the wet days. I mean, you're just drenched. Like as soon as you get out and start walking in, you are soaked.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
That's the hard part about the coast too. Like if you don't have a lot of days to hunt, going all in on the national forest is probably not worth it for you unless you get lucky and go into the right drainage and find them. But because you're spending full days down into a single drainage, so you're not covering ground at all. You're just, and we got on multiple bulls, I mean, that year for sure, but you're spending at least half a day just kind of getting down in there and like, oh, there's nothing here, and we got to go straight back out of here, which is going to take even longer because it's uphill.
And the other side of that is like last year or the year before last, Josh and I were scouting like 2 weeks before elk season started. We walked into this area where I've seen a lot of sign before. And we came around the corner, and there was 3 bulls and a few cows, like 40 yards from us, just staring at us on this landing. And like that's the fun thing about the coast is you never know where they're going to be, and it's very like action packed when you're in the elk, and it's close quarters. And
the time we saw them, there was like 20 cows, and they crossed the road in front of us, and then they just dipped down below us, and they were just kind of feeding away from us, but they weren't really spooked by us. But no bulls, So it was still cool. It's always cool to see elk. I'm always just like, how are these things so elusive when they're so giant? Like, I always think that.
Yeah, I think the best days are not the days, well, obviously the best days when you harvest a bull or whatnot, but it's fun just getting out there and like getting opportunities and like seeing them do their thing. Like, that's fun to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's when you learn a lot. When the cows are talking to each other, the bulls are calling to their cows. Like,
I really want to practice calling and get better after, going with my cousin this year and listening to how good he can call and just getting that elk to respond and how cool that experience is.
It's so fun. Nothing like it.
Oh, yeah.
Like with my buck at 40 yards, I had buck fever really bad. But anytime I've had a bull coming in archery, it is that times 1,000. Like I don't even know how to explain it and how to overcome that besides continuing just to do it and gaining confidence in the moment. 700 or 800
practice
as much as you possibly can,
coming in at you.
As soon as that bull's coming, you forget everything. So it needs to be natural at that point.
Yeah.
I don't get buck fever anymore really at all. And I think it's because the first like 4 years I hunted archery, I missed like 3 or 4 deer. And like I remember the first one I drew back on, I wasn't breathing, my legs were locked, like I was dizzy by the time it walked away. I'm like, holy smokes, like what just happened,
Yeah.
But after I did that 3 or 4 times, I'm like, okay, like that's not gonna happen anymore. Like you gotta.
I never used to. That's the weird. I was always very calm, cool, and collected. And then after that antelope hunt where I like shot the decoy 3 times, and then like I just was really I think that year I was so like, I gotta fill this tag because I'd been putting in for it for 15 years, and putting all that pressure on myself. And then since then I've been a little more buck fevery than I used to be. I got it in control this year where I didn't have that at all, which was nice.
Yeah.
But I
think we add pressure to the situation, and that's like what really changes things. When you have to have the confidence knowing you're going to have opportunities. Because otherwise, if you don't even know if you're going to have an opportunity, like you get an opportunity and you're like, what do I do?
You don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, exactly.
When it's almost easier when you're the buddy rather than the guy holding the tag, because when you're the buddy and you're just kind of along for the ride, you're just like, all right, he got it done.
Yeah.
But when you're holding the tag, you're kind of subconsciously going, I don't want to mess this up.
Well, especially with an elk. I mean, if you've never killed one, I mean, archery too, like just trying to, when's the right time to draw back? When's, depending which way he's coming in, where am I going to place this shot? Like everything's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about your technique or any, everything like that, you're forgetting about what you're even doing at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That, like you said, it has to be automatic.
Yeah.
Because there's enough other variables that you've got to be automatic on your technique, because otherwise you're not going to get the right shot.
I think something that has helped me in those situations is I'm very, very aggressive. I would rather be too aggressive and mess the situation up rather than sit back and miss a situation.
Yeah. I agree.
That happened to me this year with Lyndon. we heard that bull bugle, and we got in within like 80 yards of where he was going to come down the drainage. And I could hear the herd walking through, and we were on this road, and there was a corner that wrapped around this bend between us. And I thought that they were going to hit the road and come right to me. And I sat there, and they all single filed straight down through the timber 80 yards from me, where if I would have been aggressive and made it to that corner, I would have had a shot at 20 yards.
Yeah, and wouldn't you rather risk messing it up that way than what you experienced? You know what I mean? It's
100%.
And once you've had those missed opportunities, you're like, I'm never going to let that happen again. I mean, I've shared this story before, but my first year carrying a gun with my dad, we'd walked up this hill, and it was kind of midday. You weren't expecting to see deer, and these two twin 4-points mule deer are running away from us, and I watched them through the scope. Never pulled the trigger. And my dad was waiting for me to shoot. I was waiting for him to shoot because our family first guy to see, first guy to shoot kind of rule.
Yeah.
But since it was my first year, he wanted me to shoot. So part of it was me waiting on him. The other part was maybe a little bit of buck fever and just like kind of watching it and like just panics. And then by the time they're cresting the hill, my dad's like, you know, and he never missed, and he missed on those deer, and he's never let me forget it. But it was also like a really good learning lesson where it was like next year, like, if I get that opportunity, I'm not hesitating.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care who spotted it or whatever. If I have a shot, I'm taking the shot.
That's kind of how we go as well.
Yeah.
I know he wants me to get an elk, but I always tell him, like, if you ever have an opportunity, you know, if this elk somehow loops around and comes in and you got a shot, take that shot.
Yeah, or if
like,
he's 30 yards ahead of you or something,
don't
it's
miss
a better
this
shot.
chance.
Yeah.
Like, let's harvest this bull and just get it done. Because who knows how many more chances you're going to get after that.
Well, and it's the experience together. The person that actually kills the animal, yeah, like that's part of fulfilling your tag, but it's the hunt. You all get to experience that hunt. Like the kill is not the hunt, you know? It's part of it, but it's not the part that we're all focused about. Like you said, you were just excited, probably more excited to see Josh kill that big buck than your buck.
I was. I tell people that. Like, I'm like, that memory is like something that I get to keep forever when I die. Like, the memory with my friends, with my hunting partner, with whoever, like that memory of that experience is more meaningful than like killing the animal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's the piece that non-hunters just don't understand. They think we're all bloodthirsty, you know,
that's
and
not
that's
it at all.
The kill is I mean, it's part of it, but it's not like the part that we're all like excited about. It's the memory and the gratitude and the meat in the freezer and all those things that are why we want to keep doing it. So, well, fellas, thank you for coming on. It's good. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and we haven't been able to fit it in. You know, everybody's got busy lives and schedules and new wives to keep happy. So, you know, it's tough. But I run into Josh all the time, so I always holler at him across the store. So, but
very often.
Anyways, it's good to have you in here, and thanks for sharing your stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, fellas.